Okay, today we're going to talk about how to run an Evil D&D campaign, and we're going to get very practical, not just some high-level theory that you're not sure how to implement at your game table. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to structure and drive an evil campaign, which is something I don't see talked about a whole lot. Also, a lot of the time when people say evil campaign, what they're actually talking about is a normal campaign where the characters are just murder hobos. Well, that's not an evil campaign. That's just a normal campaign that has player issues. So today we're going to be talking about how to run an actual, legitimate, evil campaign. And I have 4 main points for you. Number 1, the code of conduct. Just because it's an evil campaign doesn't mean that our norms of behavior are thrown out the window. The PCs are evil, not the players. I mean, hopefully. Anyway, there are still guidelines that need to be followed, lest your awesome evil campaign implode upon itself and, go down in a wreck of burning flames and stuff after like the second game session or so, and your group of friends disband and each of you swears eternal hatred for each other. Yeah, because that could totally happen when you're all just being evil and backstabbing each other and there aren't code of conduct and norms of behavior that you adhere to. So the first code of conduct is that you work together as a group. Remember, D&D is a group game for the most part. So players must agree that their characters are still going to work together, similar to a good campaign, even though they're evil. I mean, come on guys, the bad guys work together all the time in real life. Look at criminal organizations that have existed historically or that continue to exist. Just because you're bad and just because you're evil doesn't mean you just go around killing everyone and betraying and backstabbing everyone. Bad guys know that they must band together to some extent in order to survive and be successful. A bad D&D adventuring party is no different. And of course, this guideline ensures that the Dungeon Master is still running just one D&D game, not several, which is what happens if the individual PCs split up and pursue their own evil goals. And of course, this isn't much different than if in a good campaign, the characters all split up and pursue their own individual goals, even though they might not be evil. I mean, this is just a miserable game experience, and implemented at the table, it involves a lot of boredom and waiting around. If you have one guy going off and pursuing their own thing, then you have to run the game for them for a little bit, say 10 or 15 minutes, and then you pop over to somebody else and they go do their thing for 10 to 15 minutes, and then you pop over to the next person, and you're doing this and you're going around the table and everybody is basically waiting for 45 minutes for it to be their turn again to play their own little individual D&D campaign. Or you can do even better than that, and you ask this person what they do, you adjudicate that, it takes a couple seconds, maybe 30 seconds, go to the next person, and you do their thing, and the next person, and you do their thing. And you're going around the table constantly from player to player as they all play their individual D&D campaigns, essentially, and you gotta keep straight in your head what everybody's doing and where everybody's at and keep driving that action. Holy crap, that is a nightmare for any Dungeon Master who has to deal with that situation. You're essentially running 4 or 5 D&D campaigns simultaneously. And so the question I have for you as the Dungeon Master is, do you really want to run 4 to 6 D&D games at the same time if the PCs are not working together as a group? And the same question goes to the players. Do you really want to run all of these separate D&D campaigns simultaneously and have to wait most of the time for everybody else to decide what they're going to do in their own campaign? That's probably not going to be enjoyable for players either, would be my guess. The second code of conduct for an evil campaign is that there is no PvP or backstabbing. Now, for some reason that I cannot fathom, actually I have an idea why, players that are role-playing evil characters somehow think that this is what they should do. Basically, you have a player and their character going all power drunk with evil, and they're attacking and they're backstabbing everyone and they're murderizing everyone around them, and it just usually just ends very badly for them, for everyone around them, and for the game. And I think I understand why they do that. It's like in real life, they have to follow the rules and kind of be a good person and stuff, because if they don't, they get in trouble and they're, punished by the system and by people around them. So in the fantasy game, when they're an evil character, they really just want to do everything that they couldn't do in real life. And they just get jollies out of, doing that stuff in their fantasy game, even though it's not realistic, nor is it really good role playing in a fantasy game, in my opinion. But I understand why they do it. It just usually doesn't end very well, and it can cause the entire game to just kind of crumple in on itself. Now I mentioned that it was bad role-playing because bad guys in real life don't do this either. I mean, bad guys know that it usually doesn't work out in the long term if they go around immediately backstabbing and murderizing other bad guys, or even good guys for that matter, because bad guys know that they need to work together if they want to accomplish their goals, you know, for the most part. Now, of course, in real life, an eventual backstabbing is on the table and perhaps quite probable for bad guys who are successful. However, this needs to be off the table for a D&D game. Whenever you introduce PvP into a D&D game, or any RPG game for that matter, it introduces a very real possibility of players getting legitimately upset with each other out of character. This causes tension, it causes drama, it can ruin your campaign. It can cause certain players to get so upset because another player's character did this, that, and the other that they consider PvP, that it causes players to yell, scream, fight, and leave the game. Like, we would love it if everybody could be mature enough to roleplay those situations and not get upset like out of character, but most people are not like that. I have seen it happen enough times in my games that I just don't allow PvP at all, and we're usually all much happier for it. I mean, look at my track record. My D&D groups don't fall apart. They don't crumple. Every D&D group that I have had that no longer exists is because I had to, for certain reasons, stop running the group. There was one group that fell into a scheduling spiral of death, which most of us are familiar with, where they would only play if all of the players were there, and I tried to tell them, hey guys, this isn't gonna work. Like, if we only play when all 4 of you can be there, like we'll never find a time to play. But they were adamant that they could only play when the 4 of them could be present, and wouldn't you know it, schedules never aligned, and eventually I just called it, and I started up a different group in place of that group. So technically it imploded, but you know, I'm still gonna blame the players because I counseled them to not try to schedule games that way and they just wouldn't listen to me. So anyway, back to the PvP thing. Do you really want to risk your campaign and even your gaming group falling apart for the sake of having PvP and allowing it? I mean, is it really worth it? And the third code of conduct for running evil campaigns: set limits to evil. Decide what is and what isn't allowed. Basically, the group as a whole needs to get together and you all need to discuss what types of evil acts are going to be allowed in your campaign and what types of evil behavior are not going to be allowed in your campaign. Just because you're running an evil campaign and your characters are evil or neutral or whatever does not mean that all evil acts are going to be okay in your game at your table. For instance, things like rape, or murdering children, or torturing, or slavery. Are these themes that you want to allow at your table? Like, you need to discuss and decide this. I can tell you that rape is off limits. There's not gonna be any of that in my games ever, or any sexuality anyway, for the most part. So, like, that's just gone. That is a theme that's not going to be in my games. I don't care if you're evil characters. I don't care if that's what your character would do. Like, you're not doing some things in my games, and that's it. Now, of course, this discussion and what you choose to allow and don't allow should be informed by the player's comfort levels. What you all feel like you want to include in the game or not. And you know, more than likely it's going to happen that some of you are going to be comfortable with a thing, but there's 1 or 2 players that are not comfortable with that thing. You should probably strongly consider just not allowing that thing, because if a couple people or 1 person isn't comfortable with it, let's just say it's rape, for instance. Let's pretend that most of you are okay with having that as a theme in your game, which I find to be crazy. But if you were, but 1 or 2 players were like, no stinking way, like, I would strongly encourage you to not allow that theme and not allow that thing for the sake of your other 2 players. I mean, the only other option would be to basically play the game anyway and just wave goodbye to those players, which you could do if you wanted to, I suppose. But yeah. Now, someone will object to this point and say, Luke, these guidelines are stealing my character's agency. If I want to do X, Y, and Z evil things, I should be allowed to. And yeah, you're right, they kind of are stealing your agency, but for good reason, I will argue. If your goal is to have a fun game where everyone enjoys themselves and things don't implode, then it's necessary to set rules and limits to an evil campaign. If that's stealing agency, then so be it. And tell your players that if they don't like it, they're welcome to play in someone else's evil campaign. And then when it ends after a few sessions because everyone is pissed at each other, they're more than welcome to come back to your game and carry on like nothing happened. Sometimes people have to experience the poor alternative to understand the necessity of rules in a civilized society. Holy crap. Hello, Barbarian here with today's Sleazy plug.
if you're like me and have a very slow teleprompter that doesn't move as fast as I talk, wait, well, hold on a second. If you're like me and have a very small brain, or you just like carrying around a big axe, you're going to love Describe. It's an easy-to-use online resource that provides read-aloud text for your role-playing games. You just type in what you're looking for and bam, there it is. Then you just read or paraphrase to your players. So if you struggle to set the scene for your players or wish you were more eloquent like me, Describe can help. Tons of the narrative descriptions are free and others can be gotten through intimidation or bribery. Now, of course, I would suggest using bribery so that you don't go to jail, and if you are going to bribe them, then use the discount code, the DM Lair, to get advantage on your persuasion check. I think bribery should really be a thing in 5th edition. Like, it should be its own separate skill check. Did you know, too, that you can commission illustrations for your own personal characters or NPCs through Describe, too? They have, like, people with paintbrushes and stuff that can do really cool things over there. Oh, okay, gotta go. I forgot my money.
Number 2, an evil campaign is character driven. Now, an evil campaign is quite different from standard D&D campaigns that tend to be less driven by the character's goals and desires and more by whatever the dungeon master decides their bad guys are up to. In a standard D&D campaign, characters often react to what the bad guys are doing. For instance, in my Sword Coast Guard campaign, when Lord Paxton was trying to take over the Sword Coast, he had his vassals attacking Gauntlet Hall near Waterdeep. And the characters, of course, learned about this and had to go sort things out and take care of an army. That's what I mean by the characters react to what the bad guys are doing. But this isn't the way it works in an evil campaign. You see, since an evil campaign flips around who is the good guys and who are the bad guys, who reacts to whom is also flipped. Instead of the dungeon master deciding what the plot line or situation or story will be in the campaign, the players need to decide what the goals and motivations of their bad guys, their characters, actually are. Why? Well, because bad guys in a D&D game are the shakers and movers. They start stuff first, and then the good guys step in and try to stop them. So the players must take on the role to instigate and do bad stuff. So what are they trying to accomplish in the world? What do they want to do? For instance, let us say that all of the characters used to live in the city of Waterdeep, but for one reason or another, they were exiled and they all hold grudges. Now they want to go back into Waterdeep and reveal who the secret lords are, depose them, and take over themselves as the secret lords of Waterdeep, and basically be able to have the run of the town, perhaps correct some of the wrongs they had against them, or maybe just be evil. So the first step in an evil campaign, then, is for the players to decide what their group's evil ambition and goal is. And then the dungeon master is going to design a campaign based on that. This is why I say that an evil campaign is character driven. Now, someone might say that you could have a good campaign that is character driven too, and you're right. I'm not saying that you can't. What I'm saying is that for an evil campaign, it's practically a requirement. Okay, so how do you implement this in a practical way? My recommendation here is that you use your session 0 for creating characters and then deciding what their evil goal and ambition is. I mean, session 0, you're at the game table, all of the characters, all the players are there, and they can all discuss and decide what it is they want to be up to as a group. And obviously the dungeon master is there and can take part in that conversation and say, hey, that sounds cool, or hey, that might cause problems, or just kind of opine as well. Because the dungeon master also is running the game, and so they want to make sure that they're doing something they'll find enjoyable as well. The dungeon master should be a part of that conversation, but I would say that they should play a secondary role. Predominantly, you want the players discussing what their evil goals and ambitions are and taking the lead on that. So in the case of the whole idea of being exiled from Waterdeep and wanting to go back in and take over, that's the sort of thing that they could discuss and decide upon in session 0. And then the dungeon master takes all of that information, goes off, and does their campaign planning based on it. Now, this includes high-level campaign planning and designing the first adventure, of course. So in the example of the Lords of Waterdeep and deposing them and taking over, when you're doing your campaign planning, you're going to have different parts to your campaign. There's going to be a first part, perhaps, where the characters are going to have to discover who the secret lords are. And you're going to want to figure out various ways that there might be a possibility of discovering that, or just ask your players, what they want to do to try to discover who those secret lords are. And then you can create adventures based upon their actions and what they're going to try to do. And of course, after they discover who some of the secret lords are, they're going to have to depose them and replace them. Well, how are they going to go about doing that? Create adventures that will help play that out. Let's say that there is a masquerade ball being thrown by one of the secret lords, and the players decide that they are going to infiltrate the masquerade ball, find the secret lord, and off them. And then in the same fell swoop, replace the secret lord with one of their own. But anyway, at a high level campaign planning, you're going to do things like that. But then when you get down to the actual nitty gritty of the adventures, the first adventure might be something like simply gathering information, spying, perhaps meeting the Xanathar Guild, who might help them find out who the secret lords are. They might have to prove their worth to the guild first before they can actually get some information. So you're gonna do some planning, but my recommendation is to remain flexible. The outcomes of adventures and actions might shift what the players decide to do. So only plan one adventure at a time and be willing to shift your campaign planning as needed. Next, make sure you have your good guys react. Once the player's characters start doing bad stuff, the good guys, who are your creatures, your NPCs in the game, are going to learn about it and step in and interfere. Bake that into your campaign. For example, once the PCs start nosing around trying to learn out who the Lords of Waterdeep are, the Red Sashes, a secretive vigilante group, gets wise to them and starts interfering. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and finding the information helpful, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know about an evil campaign you once ran and what happened. Or tell us about an idea for an evil campaign that you'd like to run. Number 3, how to structure an evil campaign. There are 2 basic ways you can structure an evil campaign. First, you can structure it the exact same way you would structure a good campaign. And the second way you can structure it is do the exact opposite. And what the heck does that even mean? Okay, so a good campaign structure basically involves the party of adventurers going on adventures to achieve their goals. For instance, if there's a bad guy that's up to no good, like Lord Paxton, the good aligned adventuring party is gonna go try to stop him. So if we move over to the idea of an evil campaign, and since the campaign is character driven, the players will determine what they are trying to accomplish, and then the Dungeon Master will design an adventure around that idea. This is similar to a West Marches campaign, if you're familiar with those. Now, the DM still has freedom to design the specifics of the adventure. The character should only state their high-level goal, such as infiltrate the manor of a noble they believe might be a secret Lord of Waterdeep. The Dungeon Master still gets to decide the specifics of what's in that manor, the creatures they might encounter, and all of that. Remember, the players only control their characters. Dungeon Master still runs the rest of the world. And then, of course, once the players have said what their goal is going to be, the Dungeon Master has structured an adventure and created an adventure for them, then the characters will go on that adventure. So it's the same sort of setup and structure that a good aligned campaign would have, only the characters are deciding what their goal is going to be first, and then the Dungeon Master makes the adventure. Now, the other way to do it is to structure an evil campaign in reverse from a good campaign. And what the heck does that mean? I mean, this is basically doing the opposite. Basically, the evil characters set up a base of operations where their goons further their goals, and then they need to defend those bases of operations against the good guys' incursions. For example, your players' evil aligned characters might set up a villa in the countryside near Waterdeep where they can strike at the Lords of Waterdeep. And you know, they have it stocked with some hobgoblin hirelings to defend it, mercenaries that they purchased on the black market or whatever. And then the characters might learn that the Red Sashes are planning to send a strike force against the villa. Your players' characters then need to get back to the villa in time to defend it because their hobgoblins might not be enough. And then you run a defend the dungeon type of scenario. And that is the sort of thing that you don't see a whole lot in Dungeons and Dragons that could be really cool and a unique opportunity to do something fun, interesting, and different from the standard D&D game. Of course, you're gonna have to navigate how to actually play that out at the game table, you know, because the rules were designed for going on adventures and stuff like that, and defending the dungeon is a little bit different scenario. So you'll have to feel your way through how that actually works out and gets played. Of course, somebody could just do a video on it and explain how it's done. Now, my suggestion here is to do a bit of both of these. Since the game system is set up to support adventures first and foremost, the rules and mechanics probably would work best for that. So perhaps standard adventures form the bulk of your campaign. And then defend the dungeon scenarios might happen from time to time, but not constantly, since the rules and mechanics might not work the best for that. Furthermore, Defend the dungeon scenarios are very likely to turn into 100% combat game sessions, which ignore the other two pillars of play, exploration and social interaction. And those two pillars are extremely important for good D&D games. Now you can design defend the dungeon scenarios that have all three pillars, but I think it's more challenging to do so. Thus, I recommend a mix of these two structures when running an evil campaign. Number 4, bad guys. Or good guys, I guess. Another important point here. As the Dungeon Master running the good guys, you are not limited to creatures and monsters that are good or even neutral aligned. You can either have reasons for evil creatures to be on the side of good, or you can have reasons for the PCs to need to go up against evil creatures if you want to use them. The monster manuals honestly tend not to give you too many good creatures to use, so you would really be limiting yourself if you don't use evil creatures as well. I mean, you would be omitting some of the very coolest monsters in the game if you only ever used good aligned creatures against the evil adventuring party. This assumes, of course, that your player's evil characters are going up against good aligned creatures, because they might not be. Evil creatures fight evil creatures all the time. I mean, you could argue that good creatures fight good creatures all the time as well. So the campaign might tend toward that direction too. Another pitfall here, I think, is only using humanoid creatures because they are typically good and the group is evil. Now this does fall into the category of what I just mentioned, but I bring it up because it can lead to a particularly bland game. If the only creatures the bad guy characters, that's your player's characters, are going up against are good or neutral aligned humanoids, you know, humans, elves, dwarves, etc. And it would be bland because there is little variety in whom the players face in the game. And variety is king. Not having variety will also make the game more bland and boring for the Dungeon Master. So use all those cool creatures from the monster manuals. Just come up with creative reasons for why, so that things make sense from a role-playing or story perspective. Now, if you'd like to learn how to deal with problem players in D&D, click on the screen right here. Or if you're looking for easy-to-use Dungeon Master resources for 5th edition, you can become a DM Lair patron at the link down below and get a new issue of Lair magazine every month. And now I gotta go talk to the police, so yeah.